مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. نحن في منتصف فصل الصيف حين يبدأ الحر الشديد في واشنطن يماثل شبه الجزيرة العربية، ويبدأ كثير من الناس في الإيمان بالظاهرة الاقتباس الحراري. غادر الرئيس والكونغرس ومعظم واشنطن البلد في طريقهم إلى الشاطئ، الجبال أو أي مكان. لم تختفي مشكلات دولتنا، وإنما اختفى فقط الأشخاص المنتخبين لحلها. إذن هذه الفرصة مثالية للنعود فنلقي نظرة على الضيوف الرائعين الذين تشرفنا بصحبتهم في برنامج داخل واشنطن على مدار العام الفائت. داموا جمهوريين وديمقراطيين، صحفيين وسفراء، مسؤولين حاليين وسابقين من مختلف الفروع التنفيذية والتشريعية للحكومة. وفيما يلي بعض من أهم ما جاء على ألسنتهم. Gentlemen, we focused on one part of the ISIS problem. Let me just ask you quickly about the other part. The president also announced humanitarian support for the Yazidi people in a horrible situation, and I think we can all agree how urgent it is to assist them. On the other side of the ISIS problem, there are hundreds of thousands of Syrian Sunnis who are facing humanitarian disaster. America hasn't helped the Sunnis of Syria. How do you think this resonates, and how would you explain the differing logic and rationale behind these decisions? Dennis?
Well, I think the short answer is it does not resonate well. I think there's going to be a perception in the region that somehow the administration seems to be concerned about some in the region but not others in the region. And the Sunnis, who after all represent the majority, I think this will feed a sense of conspiracy. I mean, as you know, in the Middle East, I've often said conspiracy is like oxygen and everybody tends to breathe it. But when you see examples that tend to feed the conspiracies, it just gives more weight to them. So I think that it won't go down well within the region. I think it will add to the administration's problems right now, point one. I think point two, I do think the administration is going to have a struggle trying to come up with what is a consistent set of rationales for why it seems to be prepared to intervene in some places and not others. It is fair to say you can't intervene everywhere. That's legitimate. And the president has made it clear we cannot be the answer to every civil war. But I do think there is a question the administration will have to do better at answering, and that is what matters to us and why. And that's got to be the kind of, I think, the lodestar for what sort of shapes U.S. policy towards the region over the next couple of years.
Juan?
I think the grave challenge in the region is the perception that the U.S. has purposely not acted in ways that feed conspiracies and theories. For example, the question as to why the U.S. didn't do more initially to topple Assad, when that was our stated policy, that we were willing to do so with our allies Mubarak, and then willing to intervene, for example, against Gaddafi in Libya. And so the question of why the U.S. has been unwilling to act is a hard question to answer, in part because there are policy inconsistencies. We declared a responsibility to protect as an international norm in the Libyan context. Well, why doesn't that apply in Syria, or more aggressively in the context of Iraq? And so that's a fair question. And I think the other question that is raised in the region is, it's not as if those who are suffering in the region are asking for military occupation, boots on the ground, which is often the straw man that the U.S. administration puts out there. They see that there are small things, little things that the U.S. could have done at the right moments that the U.S. failed to do, and I think that's harder to explain. A humanitarian corridor early on in the Syrian conflict, that could have been managed, that could have been organized. Airdrops to the Yazidis early on, or attacks on the ISIS forces that are surrounding them, that could have been done perhaps a bit earlier. And so I think the question for the administration is how do you articulate what our policy is when it appears to be inconsistent? And I think a challenge for the Obama administration is there are so many moving parts here and so many contradictions that it's very difficult to have a cohesive narrative and a cohesive policy. And in particular, in the context of Iraq for this president, who declared as his political manifesto the ending of the war in Iraq, the ending of American presence there. And so to be drawn back in any way is really a political nightmare and conundrum for him. And that, I think, is driving a lot of what you're seeing from this president and his attempts to limit American activity.
Can you explain the concept of oversight? Who actually supervises the CIA?
Well, oversight, there are two aspects to oversight. One is inside the executive branch of the U.S. government. That ultimately means the President of the United States. The CIA reports to the President. And CIA conducts its covert operations, what we call covert action operations, as opposed to intelligence collection activities. Covert action operations are directed by the President of the United States. So CIA must act consistent with the mandate of the President and the White House, and the White House oversees those activities. Now, the other aspect of oversight is the Congress, and CIA has two committees in the Congress that it reports to, that it must keep apprised of its activities, and those are the intelligence committees in both the House and the Senate.
And in your experience, how closely do presidents keep an eye on what the CIA does? To what extent were some intrigued by, fascinated by the CIA, or keep more distance from the CIA?
Yeah, I found I served under 7 presidents during my 34-year career. I came to view that all presidents, certainly the 7 I served under, come to depend on the CIA and actually find the CIA a quite attractive and seductive tool in their arsenal. Some presidents take longer to come around to that view. Presidents Clinton and Carter, for instance, kept their distance from CIA in the early years of their administration. I mean, CIA, because of its image, I think is viewed by new occupants of the White House and the Oval Office with a certain degree of wariness, but they come to understand and respect and rely on CIA to carry out their orders.
And in terms of the congressional side of oversight, do the chairman and the leaders know as much about CIA operations as the President of the United States?
Well, they know a lot. We are required under law to keep them, the phrase is, fully and currently informed of all CIA intelligence activities. I mean, I think it's fair to say they probably don't know exactly as much as the President or the White House knows, because CIA has a responsibility to protect its intelligence sources. In other words, its secret agents around the world. CIA does not normally provide the names of its covert agents. I'm not talking about CIA employees, I'm talking about foreigners that we recruit. We don't provide that level of detail to the intelligence committees. But overall, they are aware of all the activities CIA is undertaking at the time they're being undertaken.
Let me ask you about China. One of the big trade stories is how much America owes China, the trade imbalance with China. How big of a problem is a trade imbalance to a country, and what can really be done about it?
Well, there are many reasons for a trade imbalance, and some of our partners will come to us and complain that we're actually running a surplus with them, and we have the surplus, they have the deficit. It upsets them. We understand, because it doesn't look good on the books, but they're not going to get a lot of sympathy from us because we have such a significant deficit with China. But there are many reasons for it, and it doesn't affect the level of growth in our economy, the innovation, the dynamism, the fact that you still have many more people wanting to study here and work here than probably any country in the world. So it's an aspect of our trade picture, but it hasn't stopped us from growing. We've had banner export years. Recently, last year, we achieved $2.3 trillion in exports. which was another record. So we're still going very strong in that department.
And do you see the world moving in the direction of trade blocks with walls and barriers that are higher and higher? Or in fact, do you see those walls and barriers falling down? Big picture, next 10 years.
Well, I'd like to see those barriers continue to fall. The World Bank has done studies that show, for example, in developing countries, those that reduce their tariff and their non-tariff barriers more quickly will see per capita incomes rise 3 times as fast. So I see clear benefits to our economy and to the economies of our trading partners. It's not a win-lose situation. Trade done right is a win-win. And expanding that winner circle, I think, is vitally important for not just the U.S., but for its partners around the world.
So, gentlemen, 50 years ago, American politics was largely about civil rights, blacks versus whites. Then an evolution toward feminism, and now, more recently, a discussion of sexual orientation and those rights. What's next on the social agenda here in America?
Well, you know, I think that the social issues are not going to be primary. I think politics is, generally speaking, about who gets what. It's about economics. And I think you have a lot of trends suggesting that inequality is going to grow. Science may even be involved in this. I mean, it may be possible for you to engineer your children, you know, such that if you're wealthy enough, you can buy your child a 150 IQ, right, and guarantee that they'll get into Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, or Dartmouth, or somewhere like that, and be you know, be a success in life. Whereas lower income people will not have that advantage until it becomes widely available, which it probably won't. So, you know, and then you've got the whole problem of robots. I mean, robots are going to do the work that unskilled laborers do. They increasingly do. What are we going to do with all those people? Life expectancy is going to grow and grow and grow, presumably. I'm 75 years old, right? I don't want to work full time, but I do want to work, and I'm working doing things that other people could be doing, right? Younger people could be doing. So are younger people going to have the opportunity to work? Those issues are the issues of the future, it seems to me.
You know, we should probably be honest here. This is not really Mort Kondracki, it's the robot playing Mort Kondracki, and he does a really good job. I actually think we will have a social conflict, and it's going to be young versus old. We already have seen these dramatic increases in life expectancy. They're going to continue to grow. We don't know what the outer limits are. More than likely, at this point, what scientists tell us is about 115 is what you could have if human beings actually have their organs all operate appropriately until they finally give out. But 50 years from now, we may well be in a position where you can replace all organs and keep people going. But as they get older, they're still going to require more care. If they don't want to work longer, somebody's going to have to pay for that. We're going to have more older people living longer and fewer younger people who are able to or willing to put in the money to take care of them. So my guess is we're going to see significant intergenerational conflict here and in a whole lot of other places. And along the way, there's one other element of this, which is that in the United States, a good part of the conflict that we have now, political and ideological, is over the reality that the society is growing less white. And the white population, as it moves to minority status, includes a lot of people who are very unhappy about this. And it's created a significant amount of the tension and the tribalism that we have in the society.
But that's what I want to. But I want to ask you
They're
about.
going to lose. They're going to lose.
So both of you seem to be saying that race is not going to be a significant issue as we look out into the future.
I'm saying the opposite for the short term.
For the short term. But ultimately, we are going to become a browner and browner society. And, you know, very, very shortly, whites are going to be a minority of the population. So there will be racial conflict. I mean, the answer to the old versus young situation is immigration. I mean, the largest group of the biggest population growth in the world, if famine doesn't intervene or disease, is going to be in Africa. I mean, we should be importing in the United States the smartest people we possibly can from all over the world who would love to come here. At least so far they want to come here. And if we swelled our youth population with smart people from all over the world, we could pay the bills for old people. Unfortunately, the political system that Norm has so well described in his book prevents us from doing sensible things, this among them.
No, that's absolutely right. I do think that we're going to see significant disruption along racial lines for the next 10 years or so until it becomes clear that it's not going to work that way. And along the way, we're going to have not just racial tensions, but potentially the rise of demagogues who will exploit some of these situations. And of course, that's also what we have seen in Europe in many places. Race matters. It can matter in a very different way, but it matters, and it's going to provide some tensions.
So 50 years ago, a big item on the agenda was the creation of Medicare and Medicaid. 50 years later, Obamacare. 50 years from now, total nationalized medicine in our country? Where do you think it's heading?
Yeah, that's where it's headed, where physicians, instead of being sole practitioners or are going to be employees of something, are going to be either of the government or of private entities. Personally, I would like to see a privatized system rather than having the Veterans Administration running everything, because you'll have long lines of people waiting. I just don't think that government efficiently manages big systems. I think it hands out money very well. It can write checks, but management is not its great strength. But given the way things are going, I think people are going to demand that healthcare is a right. And so far, we haven't figured out how we can deliver that through a private system. So my guess is that the trend is toward a government-run medical system.
I mean, no other country has a medical system like ours, which is basically half public and half private, and they're completely intertwined. But what we do have is systems that work very well with high levels of satisfaction and some efficiency that do have a mix of public and private. In Holland, for example. And we are probably not going to end up with a system like the British, which is a completely government-run operation. But we're likely to have a single-payer system like the Canadians, and one that may still involve some private insurers like some other countries in Europe or in Japan. But it's going to change very much from what we have. I think one other point is physicians are going to be much less significant in this process. It's not just that they're going to be government employees, but there's, in far less than 50 years, you're going to be able to go into an office where there's a nurse practitioner, put your finger into a little slot attached to a computer, and it will give an analysis of what problems you have. And then if there's a serious problem, you won't go to a regular physician, you'll go to a specialist or a subspecialist. They will still be significant. And we're just going to have, I think, a complete diminishment of the importance and the number of primary care physicians. They're going to be replaced at the lower level by nurses who can read the, almost like mechanics, and then subspecialists who can deal with big problems.
And of course, the opportunities of science to conquer disease is profound. Mm-hmm. Genetic medicine has just barely begun. The ability to re-engineer genes to fight diseases is just remarkable. So, and that is going to extend the older population as well.
So we have about a minute left. When you think about surprises, things that we haven't talked about yet, political change, social change, technological change, here's your chance for posterity. How will the future look so different from today?
Well, what I'm worried about, another thing I'm worried about, is that no one will have any privacy at all. That right now, people are volunteering to give up their entire lives on Facebook and Twitter and all the rest, and their computers know where they are, and their cell phones know where they are at every minute. And we've got cameras all over the place. You know, we could have a Big Brother kind of society, a brave new world.
I think there'll be some of that. There will be a lot of the conflicts that we're going through now. There will be a lot of instances in societies or outside forces who will do anything they can to prevent this march towards modernity and science and all of these other things. And because they'll have more potent weapons to use, I think one thing that will be with us 50 years from now, as it is with us today, but in a very different form, is a kind of terrorism. And I think we're going to see, in a continuing way, radical differences in societies, some of which want to go right back to the 12th century, others of which will move us into the 22nd and 23rd centuries. And the gaps there are going to be very, very great.
بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول الأفكار التي سمعتموها لحل مشكلات واشنطن، أرجو أن تتصلوا بي مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@elhura.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف، شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.